And it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you today to our very first Chambers Trade Academy. And today's session will be focusing on the Windsor Framework. Before I start, just to let you know that the slides will be shared and the recording as well, but this will be shared with you after the event. We will send you details on how to download and access both. If you do happen to have any questions throughout the conversations that we're going to have today, feel free to use the Q&A boxes and we'll pick them up in due course. Right, so I just wanted, before I welcome to our guest, James Ainsworth from the Department for Business and Trade, who kindly has agreed to join us today and tell us more about the Windsor Agreement. I wanted to tell you more about what are the Chambers Trade Academy. It's actually an informal initiative from a selected number of chambers of commerce across the UK, where we intend to provide free virtual sessions where we cover basics of exporting, importing, the latest updates on regulations as we're doing today, or tips on how to grow your business globally. Combined, we represent more than 15,000 businesses, and we engage with more than 70,000 businesses. We are international trade practitioners that provide work daily with exporters and importers, supporting you in every stage of your internationalization journey. Combined, we provide a wide range of services that support you, from international trade events to export-import and customs training courses, bespoke advice and customs consultancy services, readiness assessment, market entry services, partner finding, commercial debt recovery, foreign exchange services, credit checks, due diligence. We all are providers of certification, legalization, and apostille services. So we help companies with your requirements of export and import documentation, such as certificates of origin, AT carnets, import certificates, and also liaising with the Foreign Commonwealth Office or embassies for your legalization and apostille requirements. We are also customs brokers, so we help exporters and importers in the UK with their customs clearance and transit services. And we all are here to support you with information and support in a post-Brexit world. So that's in a nutshell. And now I would like to welcome James Ainsworth. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us today and to speak to our members and customers about the Windsor Agreement, which seems to be a huge step forward from what the Northern Ireland Protocol was or is at the moment. Whilst we know that it's still not implemented, there is a number of great improvements across different areas. So I'm gonna let you talk. So I just put the links in terms of the special guidance that there is available. And as I said, the slides will be shared. But now, yes, James, if you want to introduce yourself, what do you do for the Department of Business and Trade? And then just walk us through the key aspects of what the agreement framework is offering to businesses and how they can benefit. Yeah. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you for that, Susanna, and good morning all. Just to check everyone can hear me properly. Not so good. Excellent start. Yes, so thank you for the introduction as well, Susanna. So I'm James Ainsworth. I lead the team at the still relatively new Department for Business and Trade that is responsible for overall coordination of the department's interests in the Windsor Framework and also the UK internal market and regulatory divergence. Perhaps just to make everyone aware, of course, that the Department of Business and Trade is relatively new. We were formed quite recently out of the old Department for International Trade and combined with parts of what was the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy to create our new formation under Secretary of State Kemi Badenoch. Very glad to be here today to talk to Manchester Chamber of Commerce. I'm actually based in one of the DBT offices in Salford myself, part of the ever-increasing, particularly policy presence in the civil service that's based outside of London. And of course, in particular, one of the areas that my team covers is the overall perspective on the Windsor Framework, which I'm going to speak to you about this morning. What I plan to do is to give you a very quick overview of what the framework is, what it does, what it replaces as well. But then I'd like to take more of a deep dive into, I think, 5 key areas for business that would be of interest to those on the line in particular. And they are they concern customs, agri-food movement of goods between GB and NI, parcel movements, manufactured goods, and VAT and excise related issues. After which, of course, I'm very happy to take questions on any aspect of the framework that you'd like to discuss. I can't promise I will be able to answer any technical questions, particularly in customs and SPS related areas. They are owned by HMRC and DEFRA respectively. But nonetheless, if there are any questions that I cannot answer, I will try. But if I can't, I'm happy to take questions away and pass them to my colleagues in other departments for them to provide a more fulsome response to your particular query. I think as you start to give an overall perspective, as you noted, Susanna, the Windsor Framework was agreed and formally became international law back in March, and it replaced and amends the old NI protocol, which I think many of all the people on the line will note caused a considerable amount of problems both in Northern Ireland and for the movement of goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and moreover caused a lot of tension between the UK and the EU. And what the framework is here to do is to address the challenges of the operation of the old NI protocol over the last 2 years, and the everyday issues that were faced by people and businesses, particularly in Northern Ireland, but also for those moving goods between GB and Northern Ireland over the past little while. Fundamentally, what the framework is meant to do is to support and protect, firstly, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, most importantly, also the integrity of the EU single market, but thirdly, NI's place within the UK's internal market. And it does so with significant improvements to a range of trading arrangements that I'll go into in more detail shortly. Overall, the way it does this is by delivering a green lane for goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which safeguards the free flow of food, medicines, pets and plants, other goods, and also ensures NI is in the UK VAT area. It also fully preserves access for NI businesses to the EU market, alongside their full unfettered access to the whole of the UK market itself. At the same time, it also allows NI to benefit from all of the free trade agreements that the UK is currently striking around the world. Finally, the agreement of this framework between us and the EU provides a stable structure for the future. I'm certainly aware of the concerns of businesses of the tension that the old protocol caused between the UK and the EU. The agreement, the framework, with the EU agreeing to not only reopen the old treaty to fix problems today, but to work together if further issues arise in future, will be of great benefit, of course, to businesses. And new structures are set up to ensure this cooperation happens, and the 2024 consent vote on the Windsor Framework is protected. Moreover, both the UK and the EU have made a joint declaration to resolve issues through dialogue around the framework rather than formal disputes. To move on to talk about customs in particular, which I think, of course, will be of interest to many of members on the line. Under the old protocol, this caused significant problems for goods moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, basically as they would have been subject to full customs formalities as they were moving internationally, as if they were moving internationally. I mean, this burden resulted in more than 1 million customs declarations completed in 2021 alone. And I imagine many people on the line will know that each customs declaration had over 80 fields to be filled in and required the full 10-digit commodity code, which we knew as UKG was highly burdensome for businesses. What the framework does is deliver a new green lane, which means that goods that are staying in the UK will be freed of unnecessary paperwork, checks and duties. with only ordinary commercial information required, such as a description of the goods and their value. We've also expanded access to this green lane for the broadest range of traders across the UK. This scheme will be open to GB businesses as well as those based in NI, and also many more small businesses bringing in goods into NI for processing and manufacturing will be able to do so through the green lane, as the turnover threshold for using the green lane will quadruple to £2 million. The only checks that will be imposed upon movement of goods will be risk and intelligence based to protect against smuggling or criminality, or on those goods that are actually destined for the EU. For those goods that cannot access the green lane, such as, for example, traders who cannot be sure of the end destination of their goods when first moving them into NI, traders will have access to a new comprehensive tariff reimbursement scheme where they can show that those goods didn't ultimately enter the EU, which will supplement the existing customs duty waiver scheme available to all businesses. And we expect this to be up and running in the summer. And moreover, it will include all the backdated payments to the 1st of January 2021 for any customs claimed under the previous protocol arrangements. So what does this mean for businesses in particular? So accessing the green lane will be easy and will be through the new UK internal market scheme. For anyone online who is as part of the existing UK trader scheme, you will be automatically moved across the new scheme. You don't need to do anything. Any traders not part of it will need to do a once and done registration, providing information about your operations and the goods that you will move. Once registered, traders can send goods from GB to NI using standard commercial data provided up front, and this will be through a simple online portal. You will not need to contend with international customs paperwork. Information will be provided through sales invoices and transport contracts, this sort of information. Basically, what this means is any traders moving goods from GB to NI will no longer be required to complete onerous supplementary declarations, and your goods will not be subject to any routine customs checks. And the Trader Support Service will still be around to facilitate this process, including submitting data into the UKG systems. How will this be implemented? So firstly, businesses, you don't do anything right now. You should continue to move goods as you do currently under the current arrangements. UKG, particularly HMRC, of course, will work with businesses, groups, traders, and other operators to set out more detail on these arrangements shortly to help prepare for these changes and ensure that you have the proper clarity to move goods under the new framework arrangements. Alongside the new HMRC guidance to be expected soon, the Trade Support Service will provide businesses with extensive support to prepare for the changes, and it also will be available to submit information to HMRC on traders' behalf. In the meantime, you can make use of the TSS if you are present to help move goods into NI. We will be consulting as HMG and working with businesses over the coming months ahead of implementing any of these changes required by the framework's new arrangements. Secondly, to discuss agri-food and the food retail lane, particularly relevant, of course, to anyone on the line who moves retail food around the country. And I imagine you will know that under the old protocol, agri-food goods moved from Great Britain to NI would have faced full EU third country checks and controls had UKG not implemented standstill arrangements on the movements of those goods. And while the current temporary easements in place have overcome many of these challenges, it was only meant to be a temporary scheme that was not agreed with the EU, and it required all members to meet EU standards in full. And this was particularly disadvantageous given that NI in many sectors is dependent on GB grocery retail supplies to maintain choice, availability, and supply of food to consumers. And this would have been at risk under the old protocol, with associated costs likely passed on to consumers. So what does the new framework do? So we have secured an expansion of the green lane for UK food retailers in particular, and this will be called the Northern Ireland Retail Movement Scheme. Supermarkets, wholesalers, hospitality company firms, catering companies, any company providing food to public services, schools, hospitals, etc., all will be able to use the green lane. There will be no requirements for any costly health certificates needed for individual food products. And moreover, under the framework, there will be a radically reduced amount of checks. ID checks will go from the present 100% under the old protocol to around 5% by 2025. Furthermore, the requirement for 100% physical checks is going to be replaced by a purely risk and intelligence-led arrangement, similar to the customs processes more broadly. In particular, to mention the issue of movement of certain goods, any bans on British products moving to NI, including, of course, chilled meats and chilled sausages, have been removed. And moreover, EU laws have been replaced with UK public health laws and organic standards for any retail goods that remain in the UK. Finally, important to note that this also includes important rest of the world origin agri-foods can be moved into NI alongside UK-based products as part of this simplified scheme. For example, say from products from Costa Rica, for instance, like aubergine, for example. Overall, the solution protects the most significant critical parts of the GB NI agri-food grocery retail supply. It will ensure that NI consumers and businesses continue to access the goods that they need, and will also protect UK internal trade, even when our food health standards with the EU may diverge. And we've also protected the north-south supply chains on the island of Ireland for agri-food goods going further processing in Northern Ireland itself. We understand that operators there are those with the greatest level of integration on the island of Ireland, and they made clear that they would prefer to use the red lane to maintain those links. What does it mean for implementation? So the NI retail movement scheme will come to force in autumn 23. Further guidance on the operational and delivery implication of these will be provided well in advance of this date to allow you and businesses to prepare. And HMG will, of course, be working and consulting with you over the coming months ahead of implementing any of these changes. Third thing I'm just going to say is parcels. Again, many businesses, perhaps on the line, might know about moving parcels between GB and NI under the old protocol. Any parcels moving as such in the old protocol, if it was implemented in full, would have been subject to full customs formalities under the protocol. That would have meant customs declarations on millions of parcels per year with attendant disruption and cost. Under the framework, essentially what this means is an unprecedented scrapping of customs processes for parcels. NI consumers ordering from GB business can continue to order and receive goods through the post as the same as they would anyone else ordering goods in the rest of the UK. Again, there are no customs declarations being required here. Parcels sent between businesses will move smoothly through the green lane without any complex international customs procedures where the goods are remaining in the UK, just like goods remaining moved in GB and NI by freight. And this removes the risk of widespread disruption and cost for businesses in NI reliant on those deliveries. And fundamentally, what this means is it's business as usual. For sending parcels from NI to GB also, it will scrap any export declarations required from NI to GB required under the old protocol as well. What does this mean for you as businesses? So any, say, parcels being sent by a business in GB to a consumer in NI can move freely without any additional requirements for the consumer. Parcel operators themselves, as I mentioned, many of you, of course, will use, will work closely with HMRC to ensure any risks in the EU single market are dealt with again through risk and intelligence sharing. Parcel operators themselves, I'm not sure if anyone on the line, will simply have to regularly submit standard commercial data to colleagues at HMRC that they hold as a matter of routine at the place of delivery when moving parcels to a consumer. In terms of implementation, these new arrangements are taking place in September 2024. This will give a quite significant time for businesses to prepare, and existing arrangements will continue to apply until that date. And as always, the government will consult and work with businesses over the coming months ahead of implementing any changes required by these arrangements. Fourthly, I'd like to talk about manufactured goods. So under the framework, most manufactured goods will continue to need to meet EU rules to be sold in Northern Ireland, except for human medicines, where licensing will happen on a UK-wide basis through the MHRA, the UK's medicines regulator. Manufactured goods where there are no EU rules can continue to meet UK rules when they are placed in the market in Northern Ireland. However, at the same time, what the Windsor Framework does is introduce new and enhanced governance arrangements to support the regulatory environment in Northern Ireland concerning manufactured goods. The first thing to mention here is a new subgroup on manufactured goods under the UK-EU Joint Consultative Working Group, which will widen and deepen UK and EU information sharing on implementation and any future rule changes that impact Northern Ireland. Any issues that are discussed at this body can be escalated to the new special goods body, which will sit under the Ireland and Northern Ireland Specialised Committee between the UK and the EU. And this will consider upcoming UK and EU rule changes and provide advice on impacts and potential mitigations on goods rule changes to the UK-EU joint committee. Furthermore, what the framework does introduce a new Stormont break. And what the Stormont break means is that NI's elected representatives can veto future EU rules that they would consider have a damaging effect on everyday lives in Northern Ireland in future when the Assembly is reformed. Moreover, what the government has done unilaterally is committing to take further steps to support the regulatory environment in NI and NI's place in the UK internal market. And there are two key things to mention here. Firstly, we will be issuing new guidance under Section 46 of the UK Internal Market Act around the duty to consider NI's place in the UK internal market. What the government is also committed to do is to respond in full to any reports from the Office for the Internal Market that are requested by NI authorities to consider the impact of future EU rule changes on NI. The final key issue I'd like to talk about is VAT and excise. Obviously, VAT is always a complicated issue, particularly as under the protocol, EU rules for VAT and excise apply to goods in NI. And I think perhaps maybe those on the line might know that this meant certain UK tax changes which were not compatible with EU rules could not be introduced in NI. Perhaps most infamously the reduction of VAT on energy-saving products for the home. Under the framework, instead, we secured sort of full and lasting powers for the UK to set VAT and excise rules on other goods and alcohol in NI. And the way we've done this is by removing existing rules and preventing other new EU VAT rules from directly applying in NI. Particularly, I want to draw out here is the EU's SME VAT directive. Particularly, this will not apply in NI. We think that will save nearly 2,000 businesses from VAT registration, and also will reduce accounting and reporting burdens on GB to NI trade. What does it mean for you in businesses? Well, essentially what it means is when the Chancellor chooses to cut duty perhaps on a pint of beer, or if he decides to make it cheaper for people to make their home energy efficient, he will do so for the whole of the UK, not just GB. In terms of implementation, the UK government will have these powers, or had these powers as soon as the DE came into force. Businesses don't need to do anything now. HMRC will provide guidance well in advance of any changes to give businesses time to prepare. But what this deal fundamentally means that is in future, new policies will be introduced through the normal fiscal process for both GB and NI, as one other say. We will, of course, consult and work with businesses over the coming months and implementing any changes required by these arrangements. But those are sort of the 5 key areas that I wanted to cover today. There are more aspects of the framework which I could talk about, particularly concerning, for example, governance and in NI, for example, which I'm happy to do so. Similarly, there are further things on pets and plants, which I thought perhaps were less useful for this audience. But again, happy to answer questions in this forum. But I will stop there at that point. I'll hand back to you, Susanna, for any questions or further thoughts or reflections from attendees today.
Thank you, James. I think that was a really good overview. And I have to say that when looking at the links with the explainers, the information is relatively very clear, and it's very clear also when the implementation, is going to take place. So that is a good resource. So when you get these slides, make sure that you are checking the areas that will definitely affect your business. Just a few questions from my side. Whilst we get a few, I'll pick them up in a bit. One is, you're saying in terms of the green lane, there will be a system where people can register. So some will be kind of automatically moved into the new scheme. and some others will be able to apply very easily online. And I just wonder, is that system is already ready, or is it going to be ready by late in autumn this year, or is there any kind of time frame on that specific kind of where things are gonna go through?
So hopefully autumn, so this year. I don't have a precise date for you. As I say, yes, if you're already registered in the existing TSS, you don't do anything, it will be automatic. For anyone who's, I'm not sure when sort of new registrations for the new system will open precisely. You could, however, contact the current TSS and they can give you information as to when that would be possible. I think it might be, though, if you register with the TSS now, it will automatically transfer to the new system. But if there are, of course, colleagues on the line who are not currently registered but want to be, please speak to the TSS directly. They can give you the fullest advice of how best to do this.
Okay. There is something mentioned, and most of all the explainers, is what you also mentioned is all these changes that will be kind of implemented. There will be a lot of consultation with businesses. So how are you gonna get that kind of feedback, or how you're planning? Is that something that we just kind of send to you, or how are you planning to gather that specific feedback from businesses?
So there will be some new guides being published shortly, but HMRC in particular on the customs space have been doing a lot of external engagement, roundtables, and other information gathering exercises over the past little while, which is still ongoing. What I'm happy to do, if there are those businesses, people online who would wish to feed in information to HMRC directly, I can provide you with the contact details for the stakeholder engagement team there. Not only for you to feed in information to them, but if you want to request a meeting with HMRC colleagues to discuss particular technical aspects of how this is going to work, then they can certainly look to do that for you in particular. They do have a team there who engage with stakeholders directly on the detail, and are more competent on particularly the technical details around customs than I am, to be frank.
Okay. Thank you so much. And there was something I also read through some of the explainers, and there will be some financial support for some businesses that are kind of adapting to this new way of trading. Is that something also that will be available as soon as autumn, or any ideas?
That's a good question. I might have to take that one away for you. Yeah, if perhaps I take that question away and come back to you on that. I imagine it might be a question for HMRC. It could be the question for the Treasury as well. I will nonetheless take that question away and come back to you, Susanna, if that's
Okay.
yeah, rather than give you a wrong answer, because I'm not entirely sure about that.
Okay, thank you. I think we have a question here. Let me just have a read. So it's Matt Grimshaw. He's asking, if a wagon is leaving GB, delivering in Northern Ireland, and then delivering in the rest of Ireland, are there any additional procedures which we'll need to adhere to?
I'll look at the question, Matt. By wagon, do you just mean like a standard lorry or articulated with goods that are loaded for NI, but also for the Republic of Ireland? Is that what your question is? Yeah. Right. So I think if you've got a joint load, in effect, what you're going to do is send that load through the red lane, particularly if there are goods that are definitely bound for the EU, or effectively, or for the Republic, which obviously is in the EU. The precise mechanisms of how the check might be applied then, given if you've got a combined load, is quite a technical question. But my understanding basically is if there are goods that are bound for the EU, or ROI effectively, is going to be a red lane shipment. Again, I'm looking at a question there. I see the question from James Hill. Precisely how the check will be applied is something that I can send a question to HMRC on. I can also, in response to your question there, James, I can provide you with the detail of the stakeholder engagement at HMRC for these sorts of questions. But in response to your question, though, Matt, yeah, if it is a mixed load, if it has goods that are bound for the EU, it will have to go through the red lane, basically.
Yeah, and I think if there are more technical questions that any of our delegates have, we also have contact in the HMRC team, so we will be actually happy to maybe co-host maybe a roundtable to enable that kind of feedback from members to HMRC directly. So thank you for
offering stakeholder roundtables and meetings with interested companies, particularly those who, of course, are moving goods like you just suggested, Matt. So they can certainly set up meetings to discuss these and answer your questions in detail, and I'm happy to facilitate that as well.
Is there any other questions from the audience? Anything? I don't see anything in the chat box, but if there is anything, this is the moment to ask. Can't see. I don't know if any of my fellow chambers staff that I can see over there have any questions. I don't think they have.
On the stakeholder engagement point, Susanna, you mentioned you had a contact already. If I send the relevant detail as well to you.
Yes, I can share that in the slides as well afterwards. That's okay.
Just to make sure the members have the right people to speak to.
Yeah, and so I'm presuming the TSS, the trader support system, then they will continue providing the support that they are doing. I guess, and if there is not going to be the customs declarations bit, but they will continue to do the education piece, the advisory, well, kind of informative piece. Yeah,
they're certainly still around and will be for the time being.
Okay.
Of course, when we move into full implementation of the framework, they might be reconfigured for the new framework realities. But for the time being, and certainly through the transition implementation of the framework, they're still here, they're still around, and can advise as needed.
Yeah. I cannot see. No, I cannot see any further details. But so before we kind of wrap up this, thank you so much, James, for just coming and sharing some of the high level stuff on the Windsor agreement.
There's a question that's coming there from Richard, I think.
Didn't I see it? So if there are exports collected from Northern Ireland but flying out to London, how will this be declared?
Just for clarity, do you mean if a business imports goods into NI through Belfast or Larne, for example, then re-exports them out through London? Is that the question here?
Richard, can you clarify?
Yeah, I mean, from what that sounds like an old UK process. If you are bringing goods into NI in particular, then of course those goods would have unfettered access to the UK internal market, and then of course they could be moved out of London if that business so wishes. Perhaps the only slight thing that would be if it's a particular type of goods, for example, if you have, say, goods that have certain restrictions like dual use goods, for instance, that could of course need further checks and declarations. I suppose it depends on what the good is in particular. But the framework is basically designed to also preserve and support unfettered access from NI to the wider GB market as a whole. And indeed is meant to get rid of customs declarations that could be applicable moving from NI to GB as well. That's the principle of the framework. Of course, without knowledge of the particular case, as I mentioned, dual use is a good example of goods that naturally require further customs checks. But that's what the framework's meant to do in terms of moving goods between NI and GB as a whole.
Thank you. Right, let me just check one more time. Any other questions? Right, I don't see anything coming through. So before we wrap up, Seb, can you launch the ball? If you can just give us some feedback about today's session, and also a bit of feedback about how you're still finding trading with the EU 2 years on, will be much appreciated.
Yeah. As always as well, I'm happy to provide my contact details as well. If there are further questions or any further clarifications, please do get in touch with me. As I say, technical questions, I might not be able to answer them, but I'm happy to facilitate contact with the right people in the rest of HMG to do so. Particularly, of course, on the international trade points, as you mentioned there, Richard, happily as we are now, the Department for International Trade, Department for Business and Trade, with our Department for International Trade colleagues, I can sort of link you up with them on any questions involving the international trade aspect in particular.
Well, thank you so much. I think we're just getting a few more people answering, and then we'll close it. Before we close, I also wanted to make you aware of the upcoming sessions that we have. Next week, we have how to select the right trade show and help you grow your business. And on the 19th of June, we'll be talking about export control regulations and why they exist. Make sure that you register with your local chamber of commerce. We thank you, and yes, hopefully these sessions will prove to be informative and help you to keep up to date with, the latest things that are happening and that might be affecting you as a trader. So thank you very much to everybody who kindly answered the poll. And as we said at the start, the slides will be shared with the respective links. We'll also share the details that James will be giving us in terms of the HMRC team and himself, in case you have any further questions or require any other kind of support. And you'll have obviously the links to the local chambers participating, and that can help you on the ground, also with advice and other services. So thank you so much for today. Thank you, James, again for joining us. Much appreciated. And to my fellow chambers that also join us on this initiative. So leaving you in peace for the rest of the day and wishing you a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Great.